Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku entered you a year late. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The air in the alleyway tasted like sewage and fear. It was a suffocating, viscous taste that coated the back of Midoriya Izuku's throat, threatening to choke the life out of him before he ever had the chance to live it. The sludge villain laughed, a wet, gurgling sound that vibrated against Izuku's eardrums as the boy clawed uselessly at the fluid enveloping him. "You'll make a perfect skin suit for me to hide in, kid." The darkness was creeping in at the edges of his vision. Izuku's notebook, the charred remains of his dreams, lay abandoned on the asphalt a few feet away. No, he thought, his mind racing even as his oxygen dwindled. Not like this. I haven't done anything yet. I haven't saved anyone. Then came the pressure. A change in the air pressure so violent it felt like a storm front colliding with the earth. The sewer cover flew into the air. "Fear not, kid!" "Why?" "Because I am here." The smash of wind pressure scattered the villain like dirty rain. Izuku gasped, air rushing into his burning lungs, and the last thing he saw before the world went black was the towering silhouette of the symbol of peace, backlit by the harsh afternoon sun. When Izuku woke up, the world was a blur of harsh fluorescent lights and the smell of antiseptic. He wasn't on a rooftop. He wasn't on the street. He was sitting on a padded examination table in a room that looked like a cross between a doctor's office and a high-tech command center. He blinked, his memories rushing back. The villain. All Might. The autograph. Wait, had he grabbed All Might's leg? Had they flown? "Ah, the boy is awake," a croaky, elderly voice said. Izuku snapped his head to the side. Standing there, looking incredibly small next to a deflated, skeletal blonde man, was the youthful heroine, Recovery Girl. And the skeletal man? All Might? Izuku squeaked. The man coughed, a spray of blood hitting a handkerchief. "Young Midoriya. Apologies for the change of scenery. You passed out after the incident, and after seeing my true form, I thought it best to bring you to a secure location to talk." "Secure location?" Izuku looked around. "Is this UA? A satellite office," Recovery Girl grunted, hopping down from her stool. She poked Izuku's arm with a syringe. "Hold still. Drawing blood." "Blood? Why?" All Might sighed, sitting heavily in a reinforced chair that looked too big for his emaciated frame. The room was silent for a long moment, save for the hum of medical machinery. The symbol of peace looked tired. Not the heroic exhaustion of a job well done, but a deep, marrow-seeping weariness. "You asked me a question on the roof, before you passed out," All Might said softly. "You asked if someone without a quirk could become a hero like me." Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. The rejection. The reality check. He gripped the edge of the examination table, his knuckles turning white. "Yes," he whispered. All Might looked at Recovery Girl, then back at Izuku. His blue eyes, sunken in shadow, burned with an intensity that made Izuku flinch. "I have a secret, young Midoriya. My quirk was not something I was born with. It is a sacred torch, passed down from one generation to the next. And I am looking for a successor." Izuku stopped breathing. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Passed down? I call it one for all Might said, raising his hand. "One person cultivates the power and passes it on to another. It is the crystallization of power that spins the gears of history. And I want you to inherit it," All Might said. The smile he gave was the one Izuku had idolized since he was 4 years old, but it was softer now. "You moved without thinking. While the pros stood by and watched that boy, your friend, suffocate, you ran in. You were the only one who acted like a hero." Tears pricked Izuku's eyes. He sobbed, folding in on himself. It was everything he had ever wanted to hear. It was validation. It was a miracle. "Yes," Izuku choked out. "I'll do it. I'll do whatever it takes." "Hold your horses, Sonny," Recovery Girl snapped. She pulled the needle from his arm and slotted the vial of blood into a machine. "Tashinori, tell him the rest. Tell him the math." All Might flinched. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Right. Well, Here is the situation. The UA entrance exam is in 10 months. I can do it, Izuku said, wiping his eyes. I'll work harder than anyone. I believe you would, All Might said. But belief isn't physiology. He gestured to Recovery Girl. The old woman tapped a screen, bringing up a skeletal diagram of Izuku's body alongside a simulation of raw energy. Listen to me clearly, Midoriya. This quirk, one for all? It's a monster. It's been stockpiling power for 8 generations. It is volatile, heavy, and violent. She pointed to the diagram of Izuku. You are 14. You have 0 athletic background. You have no muscle density to speak of. Your bones are average. If All Might gave you a hair to eat right now, and you tried to throw a punch. She tapped a button. On the screen, the simulation of Izuku's arm exploded. Not broke. Exploded. It turned into a red mist. Izuku turned pale green. If we rush this, Recovery Girl said, her voice dropping the scolding tone for one of grave seriousness. If we try to cram 5 years of body conditioning into 10 months just so you can make the April deadline, you will be permanently disabled within your first semester. Or dead. The silence that followed was heavier than the sludge villain's grip. 10 months is the standard hero rush schedule, All Might admitted, looking at the floor. I wanted to believe we could do it. I wanted to believe that with enough spirit, you could clear the Dagoba Municipal Beach and be ready. But Chio. Recovery Girl, she stopped me. She looked at your medical history. She looked at the reality. Izuku stared at his hands. So. I can't be a hero? No, All Might said firmly. You can. But not on the timeline you want. All Might stood up, transforming into his muscular form in a puff of steam, though he kept his voice low. Young Midoriya. I am offering you the greatest power in the world. But I am also offering you a choice. We can rush, and you can risk shattering your body to enter UA this spring. Or, we take the logical path. The logical path? You wait, All Might said. You skip the upcoming entrance exam. You take a gap year. We train for 22 months, not 10. We build your vessel properly. We turn you into a tank that can hold this engine without blowing a gasket. You enter UA a year late, as a first year, when your peers are second years. Izuku felt a cold knot in his stomach. A year late? Everyone he knew, Kaken included, would be ahead of him. He would be left behind in Aldera Junior High, or homeschooled, while they lived out their dreams. He would be the quirkless kid who failed to even apply. But Izuku trembled. If I don't apply, everyone will think I gave up. Kaken, he'll think he won. He'll think he bullied me out of it. All Might deflated again, blood trickling from his mouth. He placed a large, bony hand on Izuku's shoulder. Let them think what they want, All Might said gently. A hero does not seek glory for the sake of glory. A hero prepares so that when he arrives, he can actually save people. If you rush and break yourself, who can you save then? Izuku looked up. He saw the desperation in All Might's eyes. The number one hero wasn't just asking him to wait. He was asking Izuku to survive. 2 years? Izuku asked, his voice shaking. 2 years of hell, Recovery Girl corrected. Dietary restrictions, muscle tearing, bone density training, martial arts. You won't just be cleaning trash off a beach. You'll be learning how to fight before you ever get the quirk. Izuku closed his eyes. He imagined Kaken laughing at him. He imagined the whispers in the hallway. Midoriya didn't even try. Midoriya is a coward. Then, he imagined the arm exploding on the screen. He imagined failing All Might because his body gave out in a critical moment. He opened his eyes. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Okay, Izuku said. I'll wait. I'll do it. All Might smiled, and this time, there was no shadow in it. Good. Then, young Midoriya, welcome to your true education. 4 months later, Aldera Junior High. The classroom was buzzing with the nervous energy that always accompanied the final semester of junior high. Career aptitude forms were being passed back to the front. The teacher, a man who had long since given up on controlling Bakugo Katsuki, tapped his papers against the podium. All right, settle down. Most of you are aiming for local high schools, but we have a few ambitious souls this year. Bakugo kicked his feet up onto his desk, leaning back with an arrogant smirk. Don't lump me in with these extras, teach. I'm the only one here with the stuff for you, eh? The class muttered, but no one argued. Bakugo's explosion quirk was undeniable, even if his personality was radioactive. Yes, Bakugo, the teacher sighed. You've certainly got the grades and the quirk for it. He paused, adjusting his glasses, his eyes scanning the list. He stopped at a specific name. A hush fell over the room. Everyone knew the routine. This was the part where the teacher mentioned Midoriya, and Bakugo exploded. And Midoriya? Izuku sat up straight. His hands were folded on his desk. Underneath his uniform, his muscles were aching from a 4 a.m. session of hauling refrigerators across Dagoba Beach, but his face was impassive. Yes, sir, I see here. The teacher frowned, squinting at the paper. You've left the high school preference blank? Just general education? The silence in the room was sudden and absolute. Bakugo froze. His feet dropped from the desk with a heavy thud. He turned slowly in his chair, his red eyes narrowing into slits. Ha! Bakugo growled. What did you say, teach? Midoriya isn't applying to UA, the teacher said, sounding relieved. Or any hero course, it seems. Just standard high schools. Bakugo stared at Izuku. For years, Izuku had talked about nothing else. I'm going to be a hero, Kaken. I'll do my best, Kaken, Bakugo whispered, smoke curling from his palms. Deku. Izuku didn't flinch. He turned his head, meeting Bakugo's gaze. His eyes were different lately. Less watery. More focused. Yes, Kaken? You quitting? Bakugo asked, his voice rising. You finally realize you're just a pebble on the side of the road? You're too scared to even take the exam? The old Izuku would have stammered. He would have waved his hands and tried to explain that he was just waiting. That he had a plan. But the logical ruse demanded silence. I'm just being realistic, Izuku lied. The words tasted like ash, but he forced them out. I'm not ready. Bakugo stared at him for a long, uncomfortable moment. He was looking for the lie. He was looking for the defiance that always pissed him off. But Izuku gave him nothing. Just a calm, flat acceptance. TCH, Bakugo scoffed, turning back to the front of the room. He let out a small explosion in his palm. Damn right you're not. At least you finally learned your place, nerd. Don't get in my way. The class laughed, the tension breaking. Midoriya finally gave up. The quirkless kid learned his lesson. Izuku looked out the window. He squeezed his thigh under the desk, feeling the new hardness of his quadriceps. Let them laugh, he thought, channeling the voice of Gran Torino, whom he had met just last week. I'm not giving up. I'm loading the cannon. 10 months later, the day of the UA entrance exam, Bakugo Katsuki stood at the towering gates of UA High School. The structure was massive, gleaming in the sun, a fortress of heroism. This was it. The moment he had been working toward his entire life. He looked at the crowd of students flowing through the gates. He saw a guy with engines in his legs. A girl with a round face looking nervous. A guy with weird elbows. Bakugo scowled, scanning the crowd. He didn't know why he was doing it. He knew the nerd wasn't coming. Deku had practically vanished over the last 6 months. He stopped walking home with people. He stopped muttering in class. He just went to school, sat in silence, and disappeared the second the bell rang. He actually did it, Bakugo thought, a strange, sour feeling in his gut. He actually gave up. Out of my way, extras, Bakugo muttered, shoving past the green-haired boy who wasn't Deku. The written exam was a joke. Bakugo crushed it. The practical exam was a playground. Begin! Bakugo launched himself into the fake city. He blasted a three-pointer into scrap metal within seconds. The thrill of destruction, the heat of the explosions, the adrenaline, it was all there. He was amazing. He was the best. He vaulted over a destroyed robot, blasting 2 more out of the air. 70 points. 80 points. He was setting a record. He knew it. But as he stood atop a pile of smoking metal, panting, wiping sweat from his brow, he felt bored. There was no one chasing him. There was no annoying, green muttering behind him. There was no one to look back at and sneer, "I'm better than you." Of course he was better. He was the only one playing the game. When the zero-pointer appeared, a massive titan of metal overshadowing the buildings, the other examinees ran screaming. Bakugo stood his ground, weighing the options. It was worth 0 points. A waste of time. He turned and walked away as the timer buzzed. Time's up. Bakugo walked out of the arena, his hands in his pockets. He had dominated. He had won. So why did it feel like he had just beaten a game on easy mode? The gap year month 14. Keep your back straight. Engage the core, Izuku grunted, the massive tire strapped to his waist dragging through the sand. But this wasn't the garbage-filled beach of a year ago. Dagoba Municipal Beach was pristine. The sun glinted off the golden sand and the sparkling water. The garbage was gone. All of it. But the training hadn't stopped. Again. Gran Torino yelled from where he was perched on a railing, eating a taiyaki. "You're moving like a pregnant cow. Agile. Be agile." "Yes, sir." Izuku wheezed. He dropped to the sand, doing a set of plyometric push-ups that launched his upper body 2 feet into the air with every rep. He was shirtless, and the transformation was terrifying. The scrawny boy was gone. In his place was a whipcord-tight athlete, scarred and tanned. His muscles weren't bulky like All Might's hero form. They were dense, compact, built for speed and endurance. All Might sat on a bench nearby, reviewing a notebook. "His combat scores are up, Torino. He's anticipating movements better." "He thinks too much," Torino grumbled. "But he's getting faster. He's survived fighting me for 3 minutes without puking. That's progress." All Might looked at Izuku. The boy was 15 now. His peers, Bakugo, Uraraka, Ida, were currently sitting in Class 1A, living the dream. They had survived the USJ attack 2 months ago. That had been a hard day. Izuku had watched the news coverage of the USJ incident in absolute horror. He had seen the shaky footage of the media outside the gates. He had heard that Aizawa-sensei was brutalized. That 13 was down. That All Might had pushed past his limit to defeat a creature called Nomu. All Might had come to training the next day with his arm in a sling, and his time limit reduced to less than an hour a day. Izuku had cried. "If I was there, could I have helped?" Gran Torino had kicked him in the shin. "If you were there, you would have been a liability. You would have died, and All Might would have taken a hit protecting your corpse. Don't be arrogant, boy. You weren't ready." It was a harsh truth, but it fueled Izuku. He wasn't training to pass an exam anymore. He was training to fight monsters. "Hey, Toshi," Gran Torino said, snapping All Might out of his thoughts. "The sports festival is next week. You letting him watch?" "I bought him a ticket," All Might said. "He needs to see what he's up against next year." "He's gonna be frustrated," Torino warned. "He's been frustrated for 14 months, All Might said, watching Izuku sprint down the waterline. "That frustration is forging him into steel." The sports festival spectator stands. The stadium was deafening. The roar of the crowd vibrated in Izuku's chest. He sat in the nosebleed section, wearing a hat and a plain hoodie, his notebook open on his lap. Down below, the first years were battling. He saw Uraraka Ochako fight Bakugo. It was brutal. Izuku scribbled furiously. Uraraka, incredible resourcefulness. She used the debris for a meteor shower. But she lacks close combat training. If she had baited him. He saw Ida Tenya. Fast. Linear. Vulnerable to lateral attacks. Then came the match that made Izuku grip his pen until it snapped. Todoroki Shoto vs. Bakugo Katsuki. Izuku had watched Todoroki all festival. The boy was a powerhouse of ice. But he was sad. Angry. He refused to use his fire. During his fight with Midoriya in another life, Izuku would have shattered his own fingers to scream at Todoroki, to tell him it's your power. But Izuku wasn't there. Todoroki fought Bakugo with only ice. He was slower, frost creeping up his right side. His movements were sluggish from the cold. Bakugo was relentless, screaming at him to use his full power, to give him a real fight. Todoroki refused. He just put up a massive ice wall. Bakugo blasted through it with a howitzer impact, sending Todoroki flying out of bounds. "Winner, Bakugo Katsuki," Midnight announced. The crowd cheered, but it was awkward. Bakugo wasn't celebrating. He was standing in the middle of the arena, shaking with rage. He grabbed Todoroki by the collar of his gym uniform while the boy was unconscious. "Don't you look down on me!" Bakugo screamed, his voice amplified by the microphones. "Don't you dare lose to me without trying!" Midnight knocked Bakugo out with her quirk to stop the assault. Izuku watched from the stands, his heart aching. Kaken won, but he feels like he lost. And Todoroki, he looks more trapped than ever. Izuku looked down at his own hand. He clenched it into a fist. "Next year," he promised silently. "Next year, I won't just watch. I'll be the one to break through to them." The gap year month 20, the Stain incident. The news broke late at night. The hero killer Stain had struck in Hosa City. The League of Villains had released Nomus into the streets. Izuku sat in his room, watching the breaking news. His phone buzzed. It was a news alert. Ingenium retired? Native hospitalized? And then, a small, leaked report on a hero forum. UA student involved? It was Ida. It had to be. Izuku knew Ida's brother was Ingenium. Without Izuku there to find Ida in the alleyway, what had happened? Details came out over the next few days. Endeavor had saved the day. But Ida Tenya had been found in an alleyway, critically injured. Stain had escaped. Stain was still free. And Ida, the report said his legs were severely damaged. The engines were intact, but the nerves were shredded. He would need support gear just to walk properly, let alone run. Izuku threw his phone across the room. He curled up on his bed, burying his face in his pillow. "I could have saved him," he whispered to the empty room. "If I had one for all. I could have found him." The next day, Izuku showed up to the beach. His eyes were red and puffy. He didn't say a word. He just walked up to a rusted truck chassis that weighed 2 tons. He gripped the bumper. He didn't use technique. He used pure, unadulterated fury. He screamed, a guttural, raw sound, and heaved the truck chassis over his head. He held it there, his muscles trembling, veins popping in his neck. "I have to be faster," Izuku growled. "I have to be stronger." All Might watched from the shadows, his heart breaking for his student, but knowing that this pain was necessary. The world was getting darker. The symbol of peace was fading. When Izuku finally stepped into the light, he couldn't just be a rookie. He had to be a savior. Month 22, 2 months before the next entrance exam. The sun was setting over Dagoba Beach. It was beautiful. Not a speck of trash remained. The sand was level. The water was clear. Izuku stood at the water's edge, wearing a t-shirt that was tied across his chest. He was 16 now. He stood at 170 centimeters, a few centimeters taller than before. His stance was grounded, confident. All Might stood beside him in his buff form. "Young Midoriya. Look at this view. It's clean," Izuku said. "You did this. But you did more than clean the beach. You built the vessel." All Might turned to him. "You are ready." All Might plucked a single golden hair from his head. "Eat this." Izuku didn't hesitate. He didn't make a face. He took the hair, swallowed it dry, and looked at All Might. "How long until it digests?" "A few hours. But we aren't going to wait." All Might pointed to Gran Torino, who was waiting by the steps. "For the next 2 months, until the exam, you are going to live with Gran Torino. You aren't going to UA with a power that breaks your bones. You are going to master the output control before you ever walk through those gates." Izuku nodded. "Yes, sir." "Midoriya," All Might said, his voice dropping. "When you enter UA, things will be different. Bakugo, young Todoroki, they are second years now. They have experience. They have public recognition." Izuku smiled. It wasn't the nervous wobble of his childhood. It was a sharp, dangerous smile that reminded All Might of himself in his prime. "Let them have the experience," Izuku said, clenching his fist. Green sparks flickered across his skin, just a trace, the power beginning to settle. "I have the surprise." The entrance exam round 2. A year had passed since Bakugo had stood here. Now, it was Izuku's turn. The crowd of new first years was large. Izuku recognized a few faces. A purple-haired boy with tired eyes who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. A loud, bald boy from another school who seemed to control wind. Izuku wore the standard track suit, but he moved with a predator's grace. He didn't look nervous. He looked like he was clocking into work. Start! Present Mike yelled. The gates opened. Most students hesitated. Izuku vanished. He kicked off the ground, green lightning crackling around his body. Full cal 5%. He didn't run, he glided. He bounced off the walls of the fake city, clearing 3 blocks in seconds. A 3-pointer robot lunged at him. Izuku didn't stop. He pivoted on one foot, ducking under the robot's arm, and delivered a precise, lightning-infused uppercut to the robot's chassis joint. Smash! The robot crumpled. Izuku was already moving to the next one. It was a massacre. He wasn't destroying the robots with brute force. He was dismantling them with surgical precision. He was moving like Gran Torino, hitting like All Might. 40 points. 50 points. 60 points. He saw the purple-haired boy, Shinso, struggling with a 2-pointer. The robot was about to crush him. Izuku flickered into existence between them. He grabbed the robot's arm, using the momentum to flip the entire machine over his shoulder. Use its weight against it, Izuku said calmly to Shinso, not even out of breath. He was gone before Shinso could say thanks. Then, the 0-pointer arrived. The massive robot punched a building, sending debris raining down. A girl with horns, a new applicant, was trapped under the rubble. The other examinees ran. Izuku sighed. Logical ruse or not, he muttered, green lightning flaring brighter, pushing to 8%. Some things never change. He bent his knees and launched himself. He soared through the air, higher than anyone else. He reached the face of the 0-pointer. He pulled his arm back. He didn't feel fear. He felt the phantom sensation of All Might's hand on his shoulder. He felt the weight of the truck chassis. He felt the anger of seeing Ida on the news. Smash! The air pressure cannon was localized, concentrated. It didn't just dent the robot's face. It caved the entire head in, sending a shockwave that shattered the windows of the fake city. Izuku flipped in the air, landing softly on a rooftop, holding the horned girl in a bridal carry. Are you hurt? He asked. The girl stared at him, wide-eyed. Who are you? Izuku set her down gently as the buzzer sounded. Time's up. Izuku straightened his tracksuit. He looked up at the observation tower, where he knew the teachers were watching. I'm here, he thought. I'm late. But I'm here. The teacher's lounge. The screens were frozen on the image of the green-haired boy standing on the roof. 120 villain points, Midnight whispered. And 60 rescue points. He broke All Might's record. He moves like a pro, Vlad King noted. No wasted movement. Complete control of his quirk. Who is this kid? Eraserhead, Aizawa Shota, stared at the screen. He was covered in bandages, still recovering slowly from the injuries he took at the USJ a year ago. His eyes were dry, bloodshot, and narrowed. He picked up the file on the desk. Name, Midoriya Izuku. Quirk, superpower. School, Aldera Junior High gap year. Midoriya. Aizawa muttered. You know him? Present Mike asked. No, Aizawa said, dropping the file. But I have a student in Class 2A who won't shut up about a useless Deku with that name. Aizawa looked at the boy on the screen. The boy looked calm. Rational. Powerful. If this is the kid Bakugo thinks is useless, Aizawa said, a rare, terrifying grin creeping onto his face, then this year is going to be very, very interesting. UA High School first day of the new term. The hallways of UA were bustling. The second years, the famous Class 2A, walked with an air of authority. They were the survivors of the USJ. They were the veterans. Bakugo Katsuki walked down the hall, hands in his pockets, scowling. Kirishima was walking beside him, talking about his new hair hardening technique. Man, did you hear about the first years? Kirishima asked. Apparently the entrance exam scores were insane this year. Don't care, Bakugo grunted. Bunch of extras. I heard someone broke All Might's record. Bakugo stopped walking. Ha! Impossible. Even I didn't break the record. That's what the rumor is. Some guy named. Bakugo turned the corner, heading toward the cafeteria. And then he froze. Standing by the first-year classrooms, adjusting his tie, was a boy with unruly green hair. He was wearing the UE uniform. It fit him perfectly, hugging shoulders that were far broader than Bakugo remembered. The boy turned. Freckles. Green eyes. But the eyes weren't scared. They locked onto Bakugo's red ones with a calm intensity. Deku? Bakugo whispered, the words slipping out like a curse. Izuku Midoriya smiled. It was a polite, distant smile. Good morning, Bakugo-senpai, Izuku said. Bakugo felt his hands heat up, small explosions popping involuntarily. You died. You quit. You said you weren't ready. I wasn't, Izuku said, stepping forward. He didn't flinch at the explosions. So I took a year to get ready. Izuku walked past him. As he passed, he leaned in, his voice dropping so only Bakugo could hear. I'm not a pebble anymore, Kaken. Catch me if you can. Izuku walked away, heading toward Class 1A. Bakugo stood rooted to the spot, the smell of ozone crackling around him. Kirishima waved a hand in front of his face. Bakugo? You okay, man? You look like you saw a ghost. Bakugo stared at the retreating back of the boy who had chased him for a decade. He grinned. It was a feral, dangerous grin. The boredom of the last year evaporated in an instant. No, Bakugo said, clenching his fists. Not a ghost. A target. The most difficult part of the logical ruse wasn't the physical training. It wasn't the sensation of muscle fibers tearing under the weight of rusted cast iron, nor the strict diet of boiled chicken and broccoli that seemed to strip the joy out of eating. It wasn't even the stinging antiseptic smell of the Dagoba Municipal Beach, which had become Izuku's second home. The hardest part was the silence. For 14 years, Midoriya Izuku's life had been defined by noise. The noise of Bakugo's explosions, the noise of classmates laughing, the noise of his own muttering as he tried to justify his existence in a world that deemed him surplus. But now, he had stepped out of the current. He was no longer a student hoping to be a hero. He was a ghost haunting the periphery of the story. He had enrolled in a generic online high school program to free up his days. While his former classmates were donning the gray blazer of UA High and stepping into the sun, Izuku was sitting in his room at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, watching a live stream of a hero fight, dissecting it with a clinical detachment that scared him a little. Kamui Woods needs to watch his lateral spacing, Izuku wrote, his pen scratching loudly in the quiet room. His bind lacquer is slower in high humidity. Today is 85% humidity. He's lagging by 0.4 seconds. He closed the notebook. The cover read Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 14. The future, Izuku whispered to himself. It feels so far away. He looked at the calendar on his wall. It was marked with a countdown. Not to a birthday or a holiday, but to the next UA entrance exam. It was nearly a year away. His phone buzzed. A text from All Might. Eat a heavy lunch. Gran Torino is coming today. He says you're too slow. Izuku stared at the phone. A year felt like an eternity, but when Gran Torino was involved, a minute felt like a lifetime. The USJ incident, the day the symbol cracked. It was a Tuesday in April. Izuku was at the beach, hauling a refrigerator on his back. The sand was loose, making every step a battle for traction. He was shirtless, his body gleaming with sweat, the definition of his back muscles shifting like braided steel under the skin. He dropped the fridge near a designated pile of scrap metal and wiped his brow. He checked his phone for the time, expecting a check-in from All Might. Instead, his screen was flooded with notifications. Breaking news, villain attack at UA High School. Rescue training center breached. All Might on site? Izuku's blood ran cold. He dropped his water bottle. UA, he breathed. Kaken, everyone. He scrambled up the concrete steps of the embankment, finding a spot with better signal. He pulled up the news feed. The helicopter footage was shaky, zooming in on the massive dome of the unforeseen simulation joint. Police cars had barricaded the entrance. Smoke was rising from the central plaza. Izuku felt a phantom pull in his legs. Every instinct he had screamed at him to run. To go there. To do something. You can't, a voice in his head whispered. It sounded like Aizawa-sensei, though he had never met the man. You are a civilian. You are quirkless. If you go there, you are just another victim for the heroes to save. He sat on the concrete step, his hands shaking as he refreshed the feed over and over. An hour later, the reports were confirmed. The League of Villains. A massive creature called Nomu. Dozens of villains, and the injuries: Eraserhead, critical condition. Orbital floor fracture. Elbows pulverized. Space Hero 13, lacerated back. Critical. All Might, triumphant, but hospitalized for observation. Izuku stared at the words. All Might. Hospitalized. He didn't wait. He grabbed his bag and sprinted. Not to Yue, but to the secret clinic All Might used. When he arrived, Recovery Girl tried to stop him at the door. Midoriya, you can't be here right now. He's stabilizing. Let me see him. Izuku pleaded, his voice cracking. Please. I need to know. Recovery Girl sighed, her expression grim. She opened the door. Tashinori Yagi lay in the bed, looking smaller than Izuku had ever seen him. Bandages covered his abdomen, the old wound, but fresh bruising bloomed across his chest and ribs. He was breathing with the aid of a cannula. Izuku walked to the bedside, his knees weak. All Might? One blue eye opened. It was dim. Yum. Midoriya. I saw the news, Izuku said, tears spilling over. The Nomu, they said it was built to kill you. It was strong, All Might rasped. He tried to laugh, but it turned into a wet cough. Shock absorption. Regeneration. A nasty combination. If I had been there. Izuku started, gripping the bedrail. If you had been there, All Might cut him off, his voice suddenly firm, you would be dead. Izuku recoiled. Do not look at me with that pity, All Might said. The creature. It was faster than me in my current state. I had to go beyond 100% just to push it back. I exchanged over 300 blows with it. All Might looked at the ceiling. There was a moment, right before the end. The creature had me pinned. Bakugo and young Todoroki stepped in to clear a path, but the creature ignored them. It was focused solely on me. If I had to protect a quirkless student in that melee, I would have taken the hit that ended me. Izuku lowered his head. The logic was sound. It was brutal, cold, and undeniable. His absence had removed a liability from the field. But the cost? All Might whispered, lifting his hand. It was trembling. My time limit. Recovery Girl says maybe 50 minutes a day now. Maybe less, Izuku gasped. 50 minutes. The symbol of peace was reduced to less than an hour of existence per day. The clock is ticking faster now, All Might said, looking at Izuku with a desperate intensity. The villains are organizing. They are bold. They attacked the school. Izuku wiped his tears. He looked at his own hands, calloused, scarred from the trash, but still empty of power. Train me harder, Izuku said. Midoriya. I don't care if my bones break during training, Izuku said, his voice hard. I don't care if I throw up every day. You're running out of time. That means I'm running out of time. When I enter UA, I can't be a project anymore. I have to be ready to fight that Nomu on day one. All Might looked at the boy. The softness was gone from Izuku's face. The fanaticism was gone. In its place was the grim determination of a soldier preparing for a war he had inherited. Okay, All Might whispered. Tomorrow, we start combat simulations with Gran Torino. No holding back. The sports festival, the Hollow Arena. 3 months later, the UE Sports Festival dominated the airwaves. The entire country stopped to watch the first years showcase their quirks. Izuku sat in the stands, wearing a baseball cap pulled low and a generic gray hoodie. He had a notebook on his lap, but he wasn't cheering. He was analyzing. The cavalry battle had been chaos. Izuku watched how Uraraka Ochako moved. She's relying too much on Ida's speed, he noted. She needs to use her zero gravity on herself to reduce drag. He watched Tokoyami. Dark shadow as timid in the sunlight. A flashbang grenade would incapacitate him instantly. But it was the tournament bracket that drew his full attention. Match 2, Todoroki Shoto vs. Zero Hanta. Izuku watched as Todoroki froze Zero in a glacier of ice that towered over the stadium. The crowd gasped in awe. It was a display of overwhelming power, but Izuku frowned. He saw Todoroki's breath misting in the air. He saw the shivering. He's hypothermic, Izuku realized. He's regulating his temperature poorly. Why isn't he using his left side? The fire would instantly melt the frost on his skin and restore his mobility. He knew why. He had done his research on Endeavor. He had seen the way Todoroki glared at the flaming hero in the stands. It was a rebellion that makes him weak, Izuku thought, scrawling furiously. He's fighting with half a deck. Against a real villain, that pride will get him killed. Then came the match against Midoriya's childhood friend. Semi-final, Bakugo Katsuki vs Todoroki Shoto. The atmosphere in the stadium was electric. Bakugo was a feral beast, blasting across the arena with terrifying speed. Todoroki was a stationary turret of ice. Use your fire! Bakugo screamed, his voice echoing through the stadium's speakers. Don't you look down on me, you half-and-half bastard! Izuku gripped his pen tight. Do it, Todoroki, he urged silently. You can't beat Kaken with just ice. Kaken sweats nitroglycerin. The cold slows the ignition, but his rage increases the sweat production. You need the heat to create distance. But Todoroki didn't use the fire. He stood his ground, building a massive ice wall. His eyes were dead, focused on something, or someone, far beyond the arena. Bakugo launched himself into the air. Howitzer impact. The explosion was blinding. The ice shattered into a million diamond dust fragments. The shockwave rattled Izuku's teeth in the stands. When the smoke cleared, Todoroki was out of bounds, lying on the concrete. He was conscious, but he looked empty. Bakugo stood in the center of the ring. He wasn't panting. He wasn't cheering. He was staring at Todoroki with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. Winner, Bakugo Katsuki. Bakugo stormed over to the unconscious Todoroki. He grabbed him by the collar, shaking him. You didn't try. Bakugo roared. You think you're better than me? You think I'm not worth your fire? Fight me properly. Midnight released her somnambulous mist, knocking Bakugo out before he could do more damage. The crowd cheered awkwardly. It was a win, but it felt like a loss. Izuku closed his notebook. He remembered the sports festival in his head, the one he had dreamed of participating in. He had imagined himself there, fighting Kaken, saving everyone. If I were there, Izuku thought, looking at the frozen, miserable form of Todoroki being carried away on a stretcher, would I have been able to make him use the fire? He didn't know. And that uncertainty gnawed at him. He looked at the podium ceremony. Bakugo was restrained in chains, muzzle on his face, thrashing against his bonds. He looked like a villain. You're alone up there, Kaken, Izuku whispered. You won, but you're completely alone. Izuku stood up and walked out of the stadium before the ceremony ended. He went back to the beach. He did 500 pull-ups on the lifeguard tower until his hands bled. The stain incident, the butterfly effect. Time moved differently when you were waiting. The seasons changed. Fall arrived, painting the trees in gold and crimson. Izuku turned 16. He was stronger now. Much stronger. He could spar with Gran Torino for 10 minutes without being tagged. He could clean the entire beach in a weekend just for maintenance. But the world outside was getting darker. In the original timeline, the one that never happened, Izuku Midoriya, Ida Tenya, and Todoroki Shoto had converged in an alleyway in Hosa's city. They had fought the hero killer Stain. They had won. But in this timeline, Izuku was sitting at the dining table, helping his mother peel potatoes. Izuku, Inko said softly, watching the news on the small TV in the kitchen. It's scary, isn't it? All these attacks. Yeah, Mom, Izuku said. He kept his head down. He knew the hero killer was active. He knew the UA students were on their internships. Ida is in Hosu, Izuku thought. He took the internship with Manuel. He's hunting Stain. A sharp anxiety pierced his chest. Ida is fast. But Stain is a monster who crippled Ingenium. Mom, I'm going for a run, Izuku said abruptly. Be careful, sweetie. Take your phone. Izuku ran. He didn't know where he was going, just running through the streets of Muzurifu, miles away from Hosu. He felt useless. 2 hours later, his phone buzzed. He stopped under a street lamp, his breath misting in the cold air. He pulled out his phone. It was a breaking news alert from a hero watchdog app. Major incident in HOSU City. Multiple NOMU cited. Pro-hero native critical. UE student injured. Izuku swiped the notification, his hands trembling. He went to the forums. The information was leaking in real time. User Hero Watcher 99 saw an ambulance loading a kid in armor. Legs looked messed up. Lots of blood. User Stain Fan. The purge continues. Izuku fell to his knees on the pavement. Ida, he gasped. The full story didn't come out until the next morning. Endeavor had arrived in Hosu to handle the Nomu. In the chaos, Stain had been operating in the back alleys. Ida Tenya had found him. Driven by vengeance for his brother, Ida had engaged. Without Midoriya to stumble upon the scene, without Midoriya to send the location pin to Todoroki. Ida had fought alone for 5 minutes. 5 minutes against the hero killer. Native, the pro-hero Ida was trying to save, had tried to intervene, but he was paralyzed. Stain had lectured Ida. He had pinned him to the ground. He had driven his katana through Ida's right thigh and left calf, severing the primary nerve clusters that controlled the engine quirk's exhaust ports. Stain had left Ida alive. Live, Stain had reportedly said. Live as a cripple, so you can tell the others that those who seek power for vengeance are not heroes. They are fakes. Stain had escaped into the night before Endeavor's sidekicks arrived. Izuku visited Ida in the hospital a week later. It was awkward. He wasn't a classmate. He was just a middle school friend Ida hadn't seen in a year. Ida was staring out the window. His legs were in heavy casts. Midoriya-kun, Ida said. His voice was hollow. The robotic, energetic hand gestures were gone. Ida-kun, Izuku said, placing a basket of fruit on the table. I heard what happened. I was foolish, Ida said softly. I sought revenge. And now. He tapped the cast. The doctors say I will walk again. I might even run. But the engines, they will never be at 100% capacity again. I will need mechanical assists to regulate the exhaust. Ida turned to look at Izuku. His eyes were haunted. I am broken, Midoriya. The hero killer was right. I was not a hero. Izuku felt a surge of rage so potent it nearly choked him. Rage at Stain. Rage at the world. Rage at himself. No, Izuku said, stepping forward. Stain was a villain. A murderer. He doesn't get to decide who you are. He defeated me effortlessly. Then we get stronger, Izuku said. He realized he had said we. You recover. You build better armor. And when I get into UA, Ida looked at him, surprised. You are still applying? Yes, Izuku said. And when I get there, I promise you, I will find Stain. And I will make him pay for this. It wasn't a heroic promise. It was a promise of retribution. Izuku realized, with a start, that the gap year hadn't just made him stronger, it had made him darker. He wasn't the starry-eyed boy anymore. He was seeing the cost of heroism in blood and bone. The final month. The vessel is ready. Month 22. February. The entrance exam was 2 weeks away. Izuku stood in Gran Torino's living room. The furniture was pushed against the walls. Izuku was panting, his chest heaving, sweat dripping from his nose. Gran Torino stood on the ceiling, upside down, chewing on a taiyaki. You're thinking too much again, the old man grunted. You're trying to predict where I'm going to be. You need to react. I can't react if I can't see you, Izuku wheezed. You don't need to see me. You need to feel the air pressure. Gran Torino dropped, vanishing in a blur of speed. He slammed into Izuku's gut. Izuku flew backward, hitting the mattress taped to the wall. Get up, Torino ordered. Tashinori tells me you're eating the hair tonight. Izuku wiped blood from his lip. Yes, sir. Good. Because once that power is in you, we stop playing tag. We start survival training. That evening, at Dagoba Beach, the ceremony was short. There were no speeches this time. Just All Might, looking friendlier than ever in the cold winter wind, handing Izuku the hair. Eat, All Might said. Izuku swallowed it. Now what? Izuku asked. Now, All Might said, we wait for digestion. And then, you try to hold the egg without crushing it. The microwave theory. 3 days later, Izuku lay on the floor of Gran Torino's apartment, screaming. It hurts. Of course it hurts. Gran Torino yelled. You're trying to use it like a light switch. On or off. You have a nuclear reactor in your belly button, kid. You can't just flip the switch. Izuku curled into a ball. The power of one for all coursed through him. It was terrifying. It felt like it wanted to tear his skin apart. Every time he tried to punch, he felt his arm threatening to shatter. Visualize. Torino barked. What is the power? It's like a waterfall, Izuku gasped. Too chaotic. It's an engine. Too mechanical. Grand Torino hopped down and poked Izuku in the forehead. You like taiyaki? What? Taiyaki. If you put a frozen taiyaki in the microwave and heat it up too fast, what happens? It explodes? Exactly. But if you heat it evenly? Low power, constant rotation? Izuku blinked. The pain receded slightly as he focused. Evenly. Throughout the whole body. Don't focus it in the arm. Let it flow. Like blood. Like oxygen. He closed his eyes. He imagined the power not as a weapon to be drawn, but as a suit to be worn. He imagined the energy flowing from his core, down his legs, up his spine, into his fingertips. Not 100%. That's death. Just 5%. Just a spark. Green lightning began to crackle around his body. It wasn't the violent, erratic arcs of before. It was a steady, rhythmic hum. His hair floated slightly. Izuku opened his eyes. They glowed with a teal luminescence. He stood up. The floorboards didn't creak. The pressure of his stance silenced them. Oh? Gran Torino grinned, showing his teeth. You figured it out. Full cowl, Izuku whispered. He looked at his hands. The lightning danced across his skin, but there was no pain. Only power. Boundless, terrifying power, leashed and waiting. Hit me, Gran Torino said. Izuku vanished. He didn't run. He kicked off the floor, shattering the wood, and appeared instantly in front of the old hero. He threw a punch. Gran Torino dodged, but his eyes widened. The wind pressure from the missed punch cracked the plaster on the wall behind him. Torino swept Izuku's legs. Izuku didn't fall. He used his hand to push off the floor, flipping in midair, and landing on the wall like a spider. I can hold this, Izuku said, his voice echoing with a strange distortion. I can hold this all day, Gran Torino laughed. All day? Let's see if you can hold it for 5 minutes against me. They fought until sunrise. By the time Izuku collapsed, he was covered in bruises, but not a single bone was broken. The night before the exam, Izuku sat at his desk. His room was stripped bare of most of the All Might merchandise. He had packed it away. It felt childish now. On his desk lay the application form for UA High School. Name, Midoriya Izuku. Quirk, superpower. He picked up his pen. He looked at the notebook. Hero analysis for the future. He flipped to the page on Bakugo. Weakness, pride. Over-reliance on right hook. Tunnel vision when angry. He flipped to the page on Todoroki. Weakness, left side vulnerability. Emotional instability. He flipped to the page on Ida. Status, injured. Reduced mobility. Needs support. He closed the book. He wasn't the fanboy anymore. He wasn't the underdog. He was the one who had watched from the shadows for 600 days, while his friends bled and suffered. He stood up and looked in the mirror. The boy staring back had a scar on his chin from Gran Torino. His neck was thick with muscle. His eyes were hard. I'm late, Izuku said to the reflection. I'm a year late. He clenched his fist, green lightning flickering in the dim room. But I'm here now. And I'm going to fix this. He turned off the light. The silent watcher was done watching. Tomorrow, the ghost would become real. The gates of UA High School were just as imposing as they had been a year ago. They were towering slabs of steel and glass, reflecting the morning sun with an indifference that felt almost judgmental. A year ago, Bakugo Katsuki had walked through these gates, chest puffed out, ready to claim his destiny. A year ago, Midoriya Izuku had been a quirkless boy who would have tripped over his own feet if he had even dared to approach. Today, Izuku stood before the threshold, not with arrogance, nor with fear, but with the quiet stillness of a soldier returning to a battlefield he had studied on a map for 600 days. He adjusted the strap of his yellow backpack. He wore the standard black middle school uniform, but the fabric was pulled tight across his back and shoulders. The sleeves, once loose, now hugged biceps that had been forged in the crucible of Dagoba Beach. "Excuse me," a voice boomed from behind him. "You are obstructing the flow of passion." Izuku stepped smoothly to the side without turning around, his movement fluid and precise. A tall boy with a buzz cut and an intense expression stomped past him. He was huge, radiating an energy that felt like a localized hurricane. "Inasa Yurashi," Izuku noted instantly, his mind pulling up a file he had started compiling weeks ago based on middle school tournament rumors. West Junior High. Wind manipulation quirk. Recommended student who turned down the recommendation to take the general exam. Interesting. Izuku watched Inasa march forward, bowing aggressively to the gate itself. "Yui hi! I am honored to be here!" Inasa screamed. Izuku allowed a small, faint smile to touch his lips. It was a different vibe from Kaken's explosive ego, but just as loud. He took a deep breath. The air smelled of city dust and opportunity. He clenched his right hand, feeling the hum of one for all lying dormant beneath his skin. A sleeping dragon he had spent the last 2 months learning not to wake up too abruptly. "Time to clock in," Izuku whispered. He walked through the gate. The orientation hall, the auditorium was packed. Hundreds of examinees sat in the dark, the stage illuminated by spotlights. President Mike was screaming about the practical exam, his voice amplifying through the speakers with enough force to rattle the seats. "Are you ready?" "Yeah." Silence. The crowd was tense. The villain attacks over the last year, the USJ, the Hosu incident, had changed the atmosphere. Being a hero wasn't just a dream anymore. It was a dangerous, potentially lethal career path. The kids here weren't just dreamers. They were the ones brave enough, or crazy enough, to sign up during a time of war. Izuku sat near the back, his notebook open. He wasn't drawing the hero costume of President Mike. He was sketching the layout of Battle Center B, displayed briefly on the screen. "Urban terrain," he wrote. "Verticality is key. The robots are top-heavy. Weak points are the neck joints and the sensory arrays on the chassis." "Excuse me." "Sir." A hand shot up in the middle of the auditorium. It wasn't the rigid, chop-hand motion of Ada Tenia from the previous year. It was a gloved hand, raised with a flourish of theatrical elegance. A boy with white hair and a pop collar stood up. "Regarding the fourth robot type on the handout, you have omitted its point value. If this is a clerical error, it is a rather unrefined mistake for a prestigious institution." Izuku blinked. He recognized the boy. "Tabita Danjuro? No, he's too young." "Wait, is that the internet personality who kept getting his videos taken down?" President Mike laughed. Okay. Examinee 2340. That's the zero-pointer. It's a gimmick. A hazard. Think of it like a thunderstorm. You don't fight it, you run from it. A hazard, Tabita mused, adjusting his collar. How tragic. Very well. Izuku narrowed his eyes at the screen. 0 points. A trap for the overconfident. Or a test of prioritization. He looked around the room. He saw Inasa vibrating with excitement. He saw a girl with long vines for hair praying silently. He saw a boy with purple, gravity-defying hair looking exhausted and cynical. This is the competition, Izuku thought. They have quirks they've used for a decade. I've had mine for 2 months. He closed his notebook with a snap. But I've been training to be the #1 hero for 14 years. Battle Center B. The bus ride to the testing ground was silent. Izuku stood near the back, holding the strap. He wore a teal tracksuit that Recovery Girl had modified for him, reinforced stitching at the joints to handle the torque of full cowl. When they arrived at the massive gates of the fake city, the sheer scale of UA's resources became apparent. It was a full metropolis, empty and waiting. The crowd gathered at the entrance. Izuku stretched his calves, bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet. Hey! Izuku turned. The purple-haired boy, Hitoshi Shinso, was standing next to him. He looked like he hadn't slept since the quirk era began. You're not nervous, Shinso observed, his voice dry. Everyone else is shaking. You're checking your heart rate. Izuku looked at his wrist monitor. 110 beats per minute. Optimal for engagement. Being nervous burns glycogen. I can't afford the waste. Shinso stared at him. Right. You're one of those intense types. I'm late, Izuku said simply. Late? For class. Before Shinso could ask what that meant, Present Mix's voice blasted from the observation tower. And start. The crowd hesitated. Just like the year before, the conditioning of wait for the signal held them back. But Izuku knew better. All Might had drilled it into him. Villains don't count down. Disasters don't give you a starting gun. The moment the first syllable left Present Mix's lips, green lightning crackled around Izuku's body. One for all, full cowling. 5%. The air pressure around him shifted. The concrete beneath his feet cracked. Boom. Izuku vanished. He was a blur of teal and green, leaving a trail of dust in his wake. He was 50 meters into the city before the other students even took their first step. What are you waiting for? There are no countdowns in real battles. Follow that kid. The panic set in, and the stampede began. But Izuku was already at work. He rounded a corner and found a squadron of three-pointers, massive, treaded robots with missile launchers. Target acquired, Izuku muttered. He didn't wind up a massive punch. He didn't scream. He leaped, bouncing off a lamppost to gain height. He landed on the shoulders of the center robot. Don't fight the armor. Fight the mechanics. He drove his fist into the exposed sensory cluster at the robot's neck. The metal crunched like tin foil. Green energy flared for a microsecond, just enough to sever the connection. The robot powered down instantly. Izuku used the falling chassis as a springboard, launching himself at the second robot. A roundhouse kick, infused with 5% power, snapped the robot's targeting array. In 10 seconds, 3 robots were scrap metal. 18 points, Izuku counted, already sprinting down the alleyway. He moved through the city like a ghost. He wasn't destroying the city like Bakugo would have. He was navigating it. He ran along walls, swung from flagpoles, and struck with surgical precision. He turned a corner and saw Inasa Yorashi. The wind user was floating in the center of the street. A tornado of debris swirled around him. Passion! Inasa screamed, throwing his arms out. The wind slammed 5 robots into a building, flattening them instantly. Subtle, Izuku muttered, skidding to a halt. Inasa looked down, grinning wildly. Hey! You're fast. Let's see who can wreck more. I'm not here to wreck, Izuku said, spotting a one-pointer sneaking up behind Inasa. Izuku flickered. He dashed past the wind barrier, ducked under the robot's grasp, and tapped the emergency shut-off valve on its undercarriage with an upward palm strike. The robot collapsed. I'm here to save, Izuku finished, looking back at Inasa. Watch your 6. Izuku bolted away. Inasa blinked, then let out a roar of delighted laughter. I like him. The observation room. The teachers of UA gathered around the wall of monitors. The atmosphere was different this year. There was less banter. Aizawa Shoto sat in the back, his face half hidden by his capture scarf. His eyes were dry and bloodshot, scanning the screens with paranoid intensity. This batch is aggressive, Midnight noted. Look at the wind kid. Yorashi. He's raw power, and the girl who enlarges objects, Cementas added. Kodai Yui. Very tactical. Bud Niza squeaked, sipping his tea. We have an anomaly. He pointed a paw at the center screen. It showed Midoriya Izuku. He was moving through a chaotic melee of robots. He wasn't getting hit. He wasn't wasting energy. Who is that? Vlad King asked. His quirk looks like a strength enhancer, but his mobility is on par with a speed type. Midoriya Izuku, Aizawa said, his voice raspy. He picked up a file. Gap year student. Failed to apply last year. He didn't fail, All Might said from the shadows of the doorway. He was in his skinny form, leaning against the frame. He waited. Aizawa turned his head slowly. You know him? I've been keeping an eye on him, All Might said, trying to keep the pride out of his voice and failing. He decided he wasn't physically ready last year, so he spent the last 12 months conditioning his body. On the screen, Izuku performed a mid-air spin, dodging a laser blast, and kicked a robot's head clean off. That's not just conditioning, Sniper noted. That's combat experience. He's checking corners. He's prioritizing targets based on threat level to nearby students. He's not playing a game. Aizawa narrowed his eyes. He fights like a pro. It's unnerving. Let's see how he handles the stress test, Nisa said, his hand hovering over the red button. Release the villain. The 0-pointer. The ground shook. It wasn't a rumble. It was an earthquake. Buildings cracked. Glass shattered. From the center of the city, the 0-pointer rose. It was colossal, bigger than the previous year's model, designed to intimidate a generation of students who had grown up watching villain attacks on the news. Dust billowed out, choking the streets. Retreat! Someone screamed. The students broke. The bravado of the exam shattered. They turned and ran. Izuku skidded to a stop on a rooftop. He had 68 points. He was safe. The logical move, the rational move, was to retreat. He watched the robot grind forward. Its massive hand smashed a building, sending debris raining down into the street below. Through the dust, Izuku heard a sound. Not a scream, but a grunt of effort. He looked down. Trapped under a slab of concrete was a girl with short, bobbed black hair. Yui Kodai. She had tried to enlarge a piece of debris to shield herself, but the falling building had pinned her leg. The 0-pointer was looming over her. Its tracks were grinding the pavement, seconds away from crushing her position. The other students were running away. Shinso was too far. Inesa was on the other side of the district. Izuku didn't think. Or rather, he thought faster than he ever had before. Distance, 40 meters. Height of robot, 80 meters. Structural weakness. Facial plate armor is thinner to allow sensor range. One for all, full cowl. The green lightning didn't just flicker, it roared. For a split second, the aura turned from teal to a blinding white. Izuku launched himself. He didn't jump. He exploded off the roof. The concrete beneath him disintegrated. He was a missile, cutting through the dust cloud. Time seemed to slow down. He saw the robot's massive metal face closing in. He felt the power of the quirk surging through his arm. It was screaming at him to let it all out, to break his bones and destroy the target. No, Izuku told the power. Control. Like the microwave. Even heat. He pulled his right arm back. He clenched his fist. He didn't tighten every muscle. He kept them loose until the point of impact. Smash! He punched the air directly in front of the robot's face. He didn't touch the metal. He didn't need to. The air pressure cannon he created was a focused tunnel of kinetic energy. It slammed into the 0-pointer's face with the force of a freight train. Crunch! The massive metal head didn't just dent, it caved inward. The neck mechanism snapped back with a screech of tearing metal. The sheer force of the wind pressure lifted the 1,000-ton behemoth off its front treads. It toppled backward, crashing into the buildings behind it with a sound that deafened the city. Izuku was falling now. The ground was rushing up. Landing strategy. His mind fired. He twisted in the air. He aimed his palm at the ground. Delaware smash. No, too much damage to fingers. Air force. He flicked his fingers, creating a cushion of air pressure that slowed his descent. He landed in a crouch, sliding backward, his boots carving grooves into the asphalt. He stopped 2 feet from Yui Kodai. He stood up, the green lightning fading. He wasn't panting. He wasn't holding a broken arm. He just looked, focused. He grabbed the slab of concrete pinning her. Can you move your leg? He asked calmly, lifting the 2-ton slab with one hand as if it were cardboard. Yui stared at him. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the dust and the boy who had just punched a titan. I think so. Good. Izuku tossed the slab aside. He offered her a hand. We need to clear the area. It might explode. Time's up. The siren wailed. The dust began to settle. Izuku looked at his hand. It was trembling slightly, the skin red and hot, but the bones were whole. He clenched his fist. A smile broke onto his face, not the timid smile of a boy hoping to pass, but the fierce grin of a man who had just confirmed his own existence. I did it. I held the egg. 1 week later, the Midoriya apartment. The letter was heavy. Inko Midoriya was pacing in the hallway, wringing her hands. Izuku! Open it! Or don't. Maybe we should just have tea. Izuku sat at his desk. He looked at the envelope. Yui High School. He tore it open. A holographic disc fell out. All Might appeared. He was in his yellow suit, posing dramatically. I am here. As a projection, Izuku smiled. Classic. Young Midoriya. The results are in. The written exam? Flawless. You've clearly spent your gap year studying more than just punches. But the practical. All Might paused. The hologram zoomed in on his face. He looked emotional. You destroyed 68 points worth of villains. That alone would have been a top score. But that is not all a hero does. The video shifted. It showed the clip of Izuku lifting the slab off Yui Kodai. It showed him helping Shinso. It showed him tapping the shut-off valves to save others' energy. This year, the judges were looking for something specific. Competence. In a world that is getting darker, we need heroes who are efficient. Who are decisive. Rescue points, 80. Izuku's eyes widened. Total score, 148 points. All Might leaned into the camera. You didn't just pass, Izuku. You set a new school record. You surpassed the record set by All Might 30 years ago. Tears pricked Izuku's eyes. Not tears of relief, but of vindication. Come, young Midoriya. This is your Hero Academia. You kept us waiting, but you have finally arrived. April the first day, the hallways of UA were crowded. The rumors were already flying. Did you hear about the first year who punched the zero-pointer? I heard he didn't even use his quirk until the exam started. They say he's scary. Izuku walked through the halls. He felt the stares. He ignored them. He was looking for a specific door. 1A. He found it. The massive door, designed for giants. He took a deep breath. This is it. No turning back. He slid the door open. The classroom was loud. Stop putting your feet on the desk. It is disrespectful to the craftsman. Izuku blinked. A tall boy with glasses and blue hair was chopping the air. But it wasn't Ida. It was a new student, seemingly a stickler for rules too. Shut up. I'm feeling the vibe of the wood. Inasa Yorashi screamed back, leaning back in his chair with his feet up. Greetings, a calm voice said. Izuku turned. Yui Kodai nodded to him from her desk. You are the strong one, Midoriya, Izuku said, nodding back. He scanned the room. There was Shinso, sitting in the back, looking bored. There was a girl with vines, Ibara Shiozaki. There was a boy with a tail, Ojiro, held back. No, likely just re-enrolled or a different timeline quirk. Wait, no, Ojiro was in the second-year class. This was a new tail boy. No, it was Manga Fukudashi from Class B, his speech bubblehead displaying a loud hello, and in the corner, sipping tea with an air of refined elegance, was a young man with white hair. Tabita Denjuro, Gentle. A pleasure to meet the record breaker, Gentle said, tipping an imaginary hat. I am Gentle. I look forward to our scholarly pursuits. Right, Izuku said, walking to his desk. It was behind Inasa. Suddenly, the door slid open again. Silence fell over the room. A yellow sleeping bag rolled in. Aizawa Shota unzipped it and stood up. He looked worse than he did in the pictures. His scar under his eye was jagged. His presence was heavier, darker. He scanned the room with tired, cynical eyes. His gaze stopped on Izuku. For a moment, the air in the room felt thin. I'm your homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shota, he grunted. Put these gym uniforms on and head to the grounds. We're doing a quirk assessment test. A test? A pink-skinned girl, Mina Ishido's replacement, perhaps Reiko Yanagi or Pony Tsunatori, asked. What about the ceremony? The ceremony is illogical, Aizawa said. We don't have time for pageantry. The world is ending, didn't you hear? The class went silent. Aizawa looked at Izuku. Midoriya. You placed first in the exam. What was your softball throw in junior high? 60 meters, Izuku lied. It had been 40. Try it with your quirk, Aizawa said, tossing him a ball. And don't hold back. If you drop below average, I'll expel you. I expelled the entire class last year, so don't think I won't do it again. The class gasped. He expelled everyone? A lie, or a partial truth. He had expelled and re-enrolled them, or perhaps expelled a different batch. Izuku walked to the circle. He held the ball. He looked at Aizawa. He saw the challenge in the teacher's eyes. Show me you're not a liability. Show me you're not another child with a dangerous toy. Izuku activated full cowl. The green lightning hummed. He didn't bulk up. He didn't scream. He concentrated the power into his fingertips right at the moment of release. Finger flick. Air force. Boom. The ball shot into the sky, breaking the sound barrier with a crack that made Inesa cover his ears. Izuku turned around before the ball landed. Aizawa looked at the device. 705.4 meters. Rational, Aizawa muttered, a hint of a terrified smile playing on his lips. Izuku pulled his sleeve down. His finger was red, slightly bruised, but not broken. Next, Izuku said, walking back to the line. The rest of the new Class 1A stared at him. Inesa was vibrating with excitement. Shinso looked impressed. Izuku looked up at the main building windows. He wondered if Kaken was watching. I'm not chasing you anymore, Kaken, Izuku thought. I'm setting the pace. The morning sun hit the glass facade of UA High School, fracturing into a kaleidoscope of light that blinded the students shuffling through the main archway. For most, this was just a Tuesday. For the new Class 1A, it was day 2 of a reality that still felt like a fever dream. Midoriya Izuku walked the path to the main building, his stride measured and rhythmic. He adjusted his red tie, a knot he had practiced tying for 2 years until he could do it in the dark. The gray blazer felt foreign on his shoulders, tighter than his middle school uniform, constructed of a material that was resistant to heat and abrasion. It was armor masquerading as formal wear. Midoriya! Good morning! Izuku turned, his eyes tracking the movement before his head followed. A habit Gran Torino had beaten into him. Hitoshi Shinso was walking toward him, looking as if he had lost a fight with his alarm clock. The purple-haired boy's eyes were shadowed, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Morning, Shinso, Izuku said, slowing his pace. Did you review the curriculum Aizawa-sensei sent out last night? Review it? Shinso scoffed, falling into step beside him. I stared at it. Foundational Heroics and Law 101. I'm just glad we survived yesterday without getting expelled. You really set the bar high with that ball throw, you know. Now the rest of us look like amateurs. You did fine, Izuku said, his voice level. Your grip strength test was above average. And your quirk, in a real suppression scenario, it's more valuable than raw power. Shinso blinked, looking sideways at the green-haired boy. You analyze everything, don't you? It's a habit, Izuku admitted, tapping the yellow backpack where his notebooks lived. Information is the only weapon that doesn't run out of ammo. As they reached the shoe lockers, the air pressure in the room shifted. It wasn't a quirk, it was sheer volume. Good morning, Yui High School! The air is crisp. The passion is palpable. Inesa Yorashi stormed in, bowing so aggressively to the shoe lockers that he nearly headbutted the metal doors. Too loud, Shinso groaned, covering his ears. Izuku watched Inesa. High energy output. Zero emotional regulation. He's going to be a powerhouse, but he'll be prone to tunneling. Let's get to class, Izuku said. We don't want to be late for Aizawa-sensei. As they walked through the corridors, Izuku noticed the gazes. They weren't looking at Inesa. They were looking at him. The super rookie. The boy who broke All Might's record. He heard the whispers. That's him. The one who punched the zero-pointer. He looks kinda plain. Don't let him hear you. I heard he crushed a robot with his bare hands. Izuku kept his eyes forward. He wasn't plain. He wasn't a monster. He was simply late. And he had a lot of catching up to do. Class 1A. The classroom was buzzing. The new generation of heroes was an eclectic mix. Besides Shinso and Inesa, there was Yui Kodai, the stoic girl who could alter the size of objects, Manga Fukudashi, whose head was a speech bubble currently displaying an excited wow, and Danjuro Tobita, a young man with white hair and a penchant for tea, who insisted on being called gentle. Aizawa rolled into the room in his sleeping bag precisely as the bell rang. He stood up, shedding the yellow cocoon like a shedding snake. Morning, he grunted. Today we're doing normal high school things. English. Math. Law. And then, in the afternoon, Hero Basic Training. The class perked up. Hero Basic Training. This was why they were here. However, Aizawa continued, his eyes narrowing as they swept over the class, landing briefly on Izuku. You need to pick a class representative. Do it quickly. I'm going to sleep. He collapsed behind the podium. The room exploded into noise. I shall lead us with passion. Inesa roared, standing on his desk. I believe my etiquette makes me a suitable candidate, Gentle offered, smoothing his cravat. I just want to sleep, Shinso muttered. Izuku sat quietly, opening his notebook. In the timeline that never was, he might have panicked. He might have been voted in by Uraraka and Ida. But here, he was a stranger to most of them. I nominate Midoriya, Yui Kodai said. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the noise. The class went silent. He saved me in the exam, Kodai said, looking at Izuku. He was calm. He is strong. He is rational. I second that, Shinso said, raising a hand. He's the only one who seems to know what's going on. Izuku looked around the room. He saw the expectation in their eyes. He stood up slowly. I appreciate the nomination, Izuku said, his voice steady. But I think our class needs balance. Yorashi-kun has the drive, but he needs a counterweight. I propose a dual system, but if you want a single representative. He paused, analyzing the room. I will do it. But I run a tight ship. We are a year behind the second years. If we want to catch up, we don't have time for games. The class stared at him. It wasn't a speech of hope. It was a mission statement. All in favor? Shinso asked. Every hand went up. Even Inesa's passionately agreed. Inesa yelled. Aizawa opened one eye from the floor. Rational headache, he muttered. Fine. Midoriya is representative. Choose a deputy and wake me up when lunch starts. The lunchroom, the lion's den, the cafeteria was a battlefield of aromas and cliques. The noise level was deafening. Heroes in training needed calories, and Lunch Rush was serving them up by the ton. Izuku sat at a table near the window with Shinso, Inesa, and Gentle. His tray was loaded with a precise balance of lean protein, complex carbohydrates, and leafy greens, a diet All Might had designed for one for all's immense caloric burn. This tea is acceptable, Gentle noted, sipping from a cup he had brought himself. Though the ambience is rather chaotic. It's heroic chaos. Inesa shouted, blasting crumbs across the table. Izuku ate methodically. Chew 30 times. Digestion is the first step of energy recovery. He was scanning the room. Habit. Always check the exits. Always check the threats. His eyes landed on a table in the center of the room. The elite table, the second years. He recognized them instantly. They looked older than he remembered from his middle school stalking days. There was Ida Tenya. He was sitting rigidly, but there was a heaviness to him. His movements were mechanical, restricted. He wore specialized leg braces under his uniform trousers, bulky support gear that whirred faintly when he shifted. The stain injury, Izuku thought, a pang of guilt striking his chest. Nerve damage. He can't torque his engines without support. Next to him was Uraraka Ochako. Her hair was longer, tied back in a practical ponytail. She wasn't laughing. She was eating quickly, her eyes scanning the room with a vigilance that spoke of trauma. She looked tougher. Hardened. And there was Todoroki Shoto. He was eating cold soba, isolated even among his friends. The scar on his face seemed more prominent. He radiated a cold aura that kept people at a distance. And then, there was Bakugo. Bakugo Katsuki sat with his feet up on the bench opposite him, leaning back, chewing aggressively. He looked bored. He looked angry. He looked like a king who had conquered the kingdom and found it made of cardboard. Kirishima Eijiro was talking to him, gesturing animatedly, but Bakugo was ignoring him, staring at the ceiling. Midoriya? Shinso asked. You're zoning out. Your broccoli is getting cold. Sorry, Izuku said, blinking. Just observing the upperclassmen. The second years, Gentle mused. The golden generation. Survivors of the USJ. Survivors of the dorm raid. They have faced the darkness. They look scary, Yui Kodai whispered. They are, Izuku said softly. They've been to war. We've just been to class. At that moment, the universe decided to pull the trigger. Kirishima, in his excitement, knocked a metal pitcher of water off the table. It hit the floor with a resounding clang. The noise cut through the cafeteria chatter. Heads turned. Bakugo snapped. Watch it, shitty hair. He sat up, turning his head to scour the room, daring anyone to laugh. His red eyes swept across the sea of students. He looked past the support course. He looked past the general studies. He looked at the first-year table by the window. He saw the buzz cut of Anasa. He saw the white hair of Gentle, and then, he saw the green curls. Time seemed to freeze. Bakugo blinked. He rubbed his eyes. He looked again. Izuku wasn't hiding. He wasn't looking down at his food. He was looking straight back at Bakugo, his expression calm, almost sad. Bakugo stood up. His chair scraped violently against the floor, toppling over. Bakugo? Kirishima asked. What's wrong? Bakugo didn't answer. He stepped over the bench. Smoke began to curl from his palms. The smell of burning caramel drifted through the air. Deku? The word was a whisper, but it carried across the room like a gunshot. Izuku sighed. He set his chopsticks down. Here it comes, Izuku murmured to Shinso. Don't interfere. What? Shinso asked. Bakugo began to walk. Then he began to trot. Then, with a roar that silenced the entire cafeteria, he broke into a sprint. DKU, the encounter, the cafeteria cleared a path. It was instinct. When the top student of the second year, the winner of the sports festival, the survivor of Kamino, charged, you got out of the way. Bakugo vaulted over a table, explosions popping in his hands to accelerate his movement. He landed in the aisle 5 feet from Izuku's table. You! Bakugo screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Izuku. What the hell is this? Izuku stood up slowly. He wiped his mouth with a napkin. Hello, Kaken, Izuku said. It's been a while. Bakugo stared at the uniform. The gray blazer. The red tie. The UA emblem. You're wearing it, Bakugo snarled. You're wearing the uniform. I am. You quit. Bakugo stepped forward, smoke billowing. You ran away. You didn't apply. You told everyone you weren't ready. You let me think you were gone. I didn't quit, Izuku said calmly. I waited. Waited? Bakugo laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. You wasted a year. While I was fighting villains, while I was getting stronger, you were doing what? Hiding in your room? And now you think you can just waltz in here a year late and play hero? The cafeteria was dead silent. Even the lunch ladies stopped serving. I wasn't hiding, Izuku said. His voice was low, but it had a timbre to it, a depth that hadn't been there in middle school. I was training. I knew I couldn't keep up with you the way I was, so I took the time to build a foundation. Don't give me that crap. Bakugo lunged. He grabbed Izuku by the collar of his blazer. You looked down on me. You thought you could just skip the hard part and show up when you felt like it? You think this is a game? Small explosions popped against Izuku's lapel, singing the fabric. Let him go, Shinso said, standing up, his eyes narrowing. Stay out of this, eyebags. Bakugo roared without looking back. He stared into Izuku's eyes, searching for the fear. Searching for the trembling, weeping Deku he knew. He didn't find him. Izuku's eyes were clear. They were the eyes of someone who had stared down a 2-ton robot and punched it in the face. Kaken, Izuku said gently. Let go. Make me, Bakugo hissed. Show me what you did for a year, you quirkless reject. Bakugo pulled back his right hand. It wasn't a lethal shot, but it was a heavy right hook, loaded with enough nitroglycerin to bruise bone and rattle teeth. It was the same punch he had used to bully Izuku since they were 4. He swung. Pop crack. The explosion didn't happen on Izuku's face. It happened in the air, muffled. The cafeteria gasped. Izuku had raised his left hand. He had caught Bakugo's wrist. Green lightning, subtle, barely visible in the bright cafeteria lights, traced lines across Izuku's skin. Full cal 5%. Bakugo's eyes widened. He tried to pull his arm back. It didn't move. It was like his arm was trapped in a hydraulic press. What? Bakugo breathed. I didn't give up, Izuku said, tightening his grip just enough to force Bakugo to wince. And I didn't look down on you. I looked up to you, Kaken. That's why I couldn't come here until I was ready to stand next to you. He leaned in closer. I took the long way, Izuku whispered. But I'm here now. Bakugo stared at the green sparks. He felt the immense, dense strength in the hand holding him. This wasn't the grip of a weakling. This was the grip of something else. You! Bakugo gritted his teeth. You have a quirk? I borrowed it, Izuku said enigmatically. To catch up. Bakugo's shock turned into a fresh wave of fury. You lied to me for a decade? You lied to me. Bakugo's left hand came up, sparking with a much larger explosion. Erase. The sparks died instantly. Bakugo felt his strength sap. That is enough, a tired, angry voice commanded. Aizawa stood at the entrance of the cafeteria, his hair floating, his eyes glowing red. Beside him stood Midnight, the homeroom teacher for Class 2A, formerly 1A. She looked stern, her whip already in hand. Bakugo Katsuki, Midnight said, her voice sharp. Assaulting a junior student? In the cafeteria? Detention. 1 week. And you'll be cleaning the gym. Aizawa blinked, his hair falling. He looked at Izuku. And you, Midoriya. Let go of him. Izuku released Bakugo's wrist instantly. He stepped back, straightening his singed lapel. Sorry, sensei. Bakugo stood there, breathing heavily. He looked at his wrist. There were red finger marks already forming. He looked at Izuku. The confusion in his eyes was warring with the anger. Deku had power. Deku had stopped him. Deku was a first year. This isn't over, Bakugo growled, his voice low and dangerous. Meet me at ground beta. After school. No, Izuku said simply. Bakugo froze. Ha! I have class, Izuku said, picking up his tray. And I'm the class representative. I can't be getting into unauthorized fights. He walked past Bakugo. As he did, he paused. But if you want to see what I can do, watch the sports festival this year, senpai. Izuku walked away, taking his stunned tablemates with him. The aftermath? 2A classroom. The atmosphere in Class 2A was heavy. The lunch break was over, but no one was focusing on the afternoon lesson. Bakugo sat at his desk, staring at his hand. He was vibrating with silent rage. Bakugo-chan, Ajuitsuyu croaked from 2 desks away. That was Midoriya-chan, wasn't it? The one who disappeared? Shut up, Bakugo muttered. He stopped you, Todoroki said. He was looking out the window, but his attention was on the conversation. I saw it. He caught your swing. His speed was surprising. I said shut up, icy hot. Bakugo slammed his fist on the desk. He's in the hero course, Uraraka said softly. She was looking at her hands. Deku-kun, he actually made it. He looked different. He looked like a tank, Kirishima admitted. Man, did you see his back when he walked away? That dude has been lifting. And he called you senpai, Bakugo. That's manly. It's mockery. Bakugo screamed. He's mocking me. He thinks he can just show up and surpass me? I'm the one who survived the league. I'm the one who won the festival. Ida adjusted his glasses. It is certainly irregular. For a student to enter a year late requires immense talent to pass the transfer or late entry exam. He must have scored exceptionally high. He broke All Might's record, a voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned. It was Midnight. She walked in, looking serious. I just came from the staff room, she said. We reviewed the first-year entrance exam footage. Midoriya Izuku scored 148 points. He took down the 0-pointer with a single punch. The class went silent. A single punch? Uraraka whispered. Like All Might? Bakugo's eyes widened. The memory of the sludge villain. The memory of All Might. The connection he had always suspected but dismissed as impossible. A single punch. Super strength. Borrowed power. Bakugo felt a chill run down his spine. The secret Deku had been keeping. The gap year. You waited, Bakugo thought. You waited until you could wield it. He clenched his fist, the pain of the bruise grounding him. Fine. You're not a pebble. You're a challenger. The first-year dorms, Heights Alliance. That evening, the new Class 1A was unpacking in the dorms. The first-year dorms had been built quickly, mirroring the second-year ones, following the security protocols established after the kidnapping incident the previous year. Izuku sat in his room. It was sparse. He hadn't put up his posters yet. Just a bed, a desk and his dumbbells. There was a knock on the door. Izuku opened it. Shinso stood there, holding a can of soda. You're the talk of the school, Shinso said. Twitter is blowing up. The sophomore slayer. Kinda catchy, Izuku sighed, rubbing his neck. I didn't want to fight him. Kaken, he expresses himself through conflict. It's the only language he speaks fluently. He looked like he wanted to kill you, Shinso noted. He always looks like that, Izuku smiled faintly. But he didn't use his full power. And neither did I. Right, Shinso took a sip. You grabbed him with glowing skin. What was that? You didn't use that in the exam. It's a focusing technique, Izuku lied smoothly. Keeps the power contained. Shinso studied him for a moment. You've got secrets, Midoriya? That's fine. We all do. But Inasa is planning a passion party in the common room. You should come down. You're the class rep. You need to boost morale before Aizawa kills us all tomorrow. I'll be down in a minute, Izuku promised. Shinso left. Izuku closed the door. He walked to the window. He could see the second-year dorms across the courtyard. The lights were on. He saw a figure standing on a balcony. Blonde, spiky hair. They stared at each other across the gap. 50 yards of darkness separated them. A year of time separated them. Izuku raised his hand and waved. A small, simple gesture. Bakugo didn't wave back. He turned around and stormed inside, slamming the sliding door shut. Izuku lowered his hand. He looked at his palm. He clenched it. I'm not chasing you, Kaken, Izuku whispered to the night. I'm coming for the top. If you're in the way, I'll move you. He turned away from the window. He dropped to the floor. 100 push-ups, he muttered. Then the party. The senpai had noticed him. Now, the Kohai had to prove he belonged.